Holla ballers, what's going on? I put this video together because although I try and teach you guys as much as humanly possible in my videos about how you can work around gear and stuff like that. Remember the original guides we did in 4.2 were from the perspective of as if you've just hit level 85 and you wanted to jump into some heroics and you're worried about getting kicked and all that kind of crap and people being rude to you, and how you can abuse the mechanics of the game in terms of understanding, not cheating, understanding exactly how bosses work and how your character works to actually nullify the gear issue. But one of the most common emails I still get is, Preacher, can you check my character? Do you think I'm good enough for heroics? Am I good enough for looking for raid? I can get in there. What do you think? And I always said to you guys, hey, as far as I'm concerned, if you can get in, you're overgeared for the dungeon. That's how Blizzard sets it. They've set a buffer zone in there so that when you actually can get into the dungeon, you should be more than capable of handling it. The healers still don't really believe that. I get a lot of requests from healers. Can you just check out my character? Can you see what's going on? And I'm trying to inspire some confidence in you guys. So this video is not about egotisticalness or trying to boost my own integrity, saying, hey guys, look, I know what I'm doing in this game. It's nothing like that at all. This is a confidence booster for you guys to show exactly how you should be able to roll and how you can cope with situations. So what I did is I found my worst geared healer, which was my Holy Paladin. My Holy Paladin's gear was atrocious. It was item level 344 of the 353 you needed to get into these heroics, into the latest heroics in the game, dropping 378 gear. So a considerable margin of difference there between the gear I'm wearing and the gear that you can obtain from the instance. So I went in there, and the first one we did was this one, this heroic here. And quite frankly, it was a little bit dull. I live streamed all of this stuff. I have cut some stuff out, but you can check the gears the same based on my mana. You can see my mana nice and clear. It was actually relatively very simple. I had no mana issues whatsoever. I didn't even have to drink in this dungeon. Now, I live streamed all of this just to prove I wasn't cheating. I didn't want to put out a video of 40 minutes of heroics or an hour. We did do all 3 heroics of the Hour of Twilight. I didn't want it to bombard you with heroic stuff, so all I did was show generally considered the more difficult areas of these heroics, like these trash packs. Some people die a lot on these trash packs. I know for most of you guys who are overgeared, is that it's not that difficult. No, it's not. As you can see, I had no mana issues at all. I went to 3/4 mana. Everyone was full health, working on the dispels. But again, it's things like the dispels and stuff that are really going to start making your life much easier. Remember, every healer pretty much has an interrupt now. With the rebuke, I was rebuking mobs. I was making sure that dispels were instant. If we had a DPS ice traps, dispel that guy. Why? Because that reduces the amount of healing you have to do passively by making sure that people are free to do DPS. It doesn't matter if they're the best DPS in the world. That's not the issue. It's the case that they can do some damage and they can get in there and help out. Again, on this boss, I marked the tank. I marked the tank as I would do if I was getting used to the heroic and I wasn't sure. I marked the tank. I know I have to stand behind the tank so I don't get silenced, which can put me behind on healing. I gave him a nice big blue square, so I just had to go stand behind the blue square. If I stood behind the blue square, I'm safe, as you can see there, and healing is never going to be a problem. I'm never going to fall behind. I'm never going to have any issues with that whatsoever. So all in all, the first heroic we did with this lower item level wasn't too difficult at all. In fact, it didn't stress me at all. I didn't have to do any healing. These are full pugs, by the way. This is exactly what you guys can run into. I didn't want to cheat or anything like that. In fact, the only thing we had happen in terms of change of player was we changed tanks in this one because someone forgot to speak to Thrall, including me, and he left because he was impatient, so we got a new tank. That was no big deal at all. But these were full pugs, random places you guys would find and we worried about finding. As you see, DPS isn't overly impressive. You generally have the 1 good DPSer and the 2 lower down DPS. Something Blizzard is working on in their code? I think so. So we decided to make it harder. How can we make it harder? Well, I had a couple of epics in that gear set and I wanted to get rid of them. So the first thing we did is we swapped the helmet for the X-52 rocket launcher, just to remove the possibility of a Meta Gem increasing your mana. We got rid of that. We also swapped out the Core of Ripeness trinket, the Epic Badge trinket. We swapped that down to the Piccolo of the Flaming Fire, giving absolutely 0 stats whatsoever. We also got the trinket from Justice Badges, and we visited the Quartermasters to get some very low blue through 346 items. Overall, this gave me an item level of 305. That's right, 305. Extremely low. Dangerously low, in fact. Dangerously low. I see, even with Blessing of Kings, I only had 69.9k mana, so you can imagine how weak my spell power was on top of that. So I was essentially playing without a trinket and without a helmet, which excludes the ideas of Meta Gems, any enchants I had on my helmet, things like that. The only thing I did do was Reforge, because as I say in all my basic 4.2 guides, Reforging costs you nothing, especially in lower gear. Reforging costs you absolutely nothing, so there's no problem with reforging. You should be able to reforge. That should be absolutely fine. It should be good for you to do that. I don't think you should have any issues whatsoever with reforging. This was very difficult for me, but these are circumstances you guys will never ever have to play under unless you force it upon yourself. It was also surprisingly fun, which was weird for me. I actually had a great deal of fun. See, I got boxed in there and got caught. Purely because it makes you use more tools in your arsenal than you would use if you were overgeared. Most people tend not to understand the full power of their character because they don't need to. Being overgeared for this stuff actually means you won't use Aura Mastery as much, Divine Favor, use your wings, your Guardian the Ancient Kings, just in terms of Paladin usage. Maybe it's Tree of Life, maybe it's something along those lines. You probably won't use those as much because you overgear it and your normal basic heals will do the same thing again. Quite a cool thing for healers and tanks. DPS won't get the most benefit out of this kind of stuff, but if you fancy just making things a little bit harder, just getting used to playing your character much quicker, much more aware of your character, go ahead and drop the item level down and go and do some more difficult content. We picked this heroic for the final one while we really reduced my gear down to nothing. Purely because this is considered to be the more difficult heroic to heal. That is obviously a subjective point of view. Some people might think another heroic is difficult. I personally agree that this one's the more difficult one to heal, depending on what bosses you get. I was hoping to get the fire boss, we didn't get that, but this one is particularly challenging. There's a ton of movement, you can be stunned, you can be silenced by the things circling, there's a lot of raid damage, there's people taking debuffs, there's all sorts of stuff going on here. You need to be very, very aware of everything around you. I think this was a particularly good boss to test this out on. This boss wasn't that bad either, although it doesn't do a tremendous amount of damage. We were trolled a little bit. The Ret Pally did not realise he had Righteous Fury on. And most people don't even realise how this boss works and where the majority of the damage comes from. It actually comes from not the boss. The boss doesn't do a tremendous amount of damage whatsoever. All these pillars that shoot out of him. It's actually the quaking pits that he fires on the floor, which grow and expand. You can see one on the left there as I move towards it. Those are actually the big damage source of these fights. And if you soak them as the healer, you actually reduce the healing needed a lot. And this is a good example of how understanding the fight is actually better than just trying to outgear it, rely on your gear, or anything like that. Understanding the fight will reduce it down even more. The fire boss I wanted to show you, I forget his name, the Tauren, he actually does most of his damage based on a dispellable debuff, which no one ever dispels. They try and out-heal it, and it ticks for around 70,000 or 60,000 damage, something crazy like that. And as you can see here, none of the DPS notice these quaking pits, but I know they're there, and I know that if I don't go and soak those, I will have to probably wipe the party, because I will not be able to out-heal the damage, more than likely. It didn't go exactly perfectly. I did let the tank die here. I wanted to show you that. I wanted to just show you exactly what happened here. He died very, very quickly, which was unfortunate. I was trying to keep him up. It just was not happening. He died extremely quickly. As you can see there, I got him a couple of Divine Lights, and then he ultimately just falls to his death. This was the first time in any of the heroics I did wearing this much, much lower gear that the tank decided to say something. And I was inspected in any way. It was just assumed I would have the gear, because everybody does these days. And the tank's question was, in fact, where is healer? He actually believed I wasn't even near him. Unfortunately, did die. I do think he could have. He wasn't doing interrupts and stuff. We were laughing while live streaming that he didn't use his heroic throw to create a death ball or interrupting anything at all. You can see there he goes and questions whether or not I'm actually there, which is fine. That was the only death we suffered. And I'm quite proud of that, in fact. So we came on to the last boss. Not exactly difficult to heal if you're aware of how this fight works again. So you guys should be taking some confidence in this and realizing that, hey, if you understand the boss a little bit, you're actually going to be fine. You can see the tank there decide to face the dragon into the party, creating a lot more stressful environment for me. He was getting it, everybody was getting breathed on. He was turning it towards me. There was huge amounts of incoming damage, but it's no problem on this fight. This fight can be completely nullified because you can blow every single cooldown you have repeatedly. DPSers tend to know that. Tanks and healers seem to forget that they can do that. You can blow Mana Tide all the time, Spirit Link all the time. You could just absolutely blow everything under the sun. And of course, as a healer, when things are feeling a little bit stressful, you can go and click the eggs. Again, these are just examples. Every heroic has some mechanic like this. Every single dungeon can be manipulated in a way to make your life easier as a healer, even down to just interrupting mobs. Remember, most of the DPS in these dungeons never interrupt mobs. They just don't do it. We always tell you, or my guides always tell you, hey, if you have a kick, if you have an interrupt, it doesn't matter if you're a tank, a DPS, or a healer, you should be using it. Why? Because it makes life so much better. Just as you should be dispelling things, you should be purging things. If you're capable of doing these things and they're in your arsenal to do them, then do them. That's what separates you from being the casual guy who's getting kicked from the heroics to the guy who's actually just owning it up, having a great time, and really just enjoying himself. I really enjoyed doing this. I thought it was a hell of a lot of fun. And you can see I'll go off and I'll click the things myself. Overall, this was a good experience for me. I just wanted to demonstrate this purely from the emails and stuff you guys send me. Please, can you check my character out? Please, can you let me know if it's good enough to get on with looking for raid and stuff like that? I didn't want... Some guys on the live stream suggested I do this in looking for raid. That is not what I wanted to do, purely because there are people in looking for raid who can quite easily cover you. People with huge amounts of gear can just spam AoE heals constantly, as we see in looking for raid, and just generally nullify the point I'm trying to make. In these 5-mans, the pressure is purely on me. The pressure is down to me to complete these dungeons, to make sure everybody's healed up. Nobody's going to help me. You might get the odd decent enhancement shaman or elemental shaman who does help out with heals, and possibly Pablo Sanchez did. He was Genji. He was the only guy who came along with me. But certainly after we'd finished filming, it was like, that was pretty insane that you did that. It's not that insane, because you understand the mechanics of what's going on. I know I can blow every single cooldown. I know I can myself every single phase of this fight and just click an egg timer and have stuff back. I'm aware of that and use it to my advantage. I will just spam heal the raid to death and make sure it's all good. So, there you go, guys. I just wanted this to help you guys out. You take it easy, ballers.